In this video, we're going to learn about limit theorems. Sometimes we also call them limit laws. The following limit laws exist for real functions as well. So we have let f and g be complex functions. So we pick two complex functions with the domain g, and let z naught be an accumulation point. We talked about that earlier also. This need to be an accumulation point, otherwise the implication going to be true while there is no such point. So we need to avoid the situation. We talked about that in the previous video, why this needs to be an accumulation point. And let c be a constant. Then if the limit when z goes to c naught fx and limit when z goes to c naught gx exist, if those two limits exist, it's very important. These two limits should exist first. Then you can see the limit of a sum becomes sum of limits. We have seen this in calculus. And the limit of a product equal product of limits. We also have seen this in calculus. And then also the quotient rule also works. But where we need the extra condition, the denominator function cannot be 0. Actually, the limit of the denominator function can be 0. And those are the common ones. And then we also have a very special case as a byproduct of part B. You can see those f and g can be the same. That means you get the power rule in that case. That means we have this extra result. So if n is a positive integer, then you can see that you can raise the limit to a power. So we have this n here. So what happened? So limit of a power becomes power of limits. And now as an example, let's try to put the sum rule, which says that the limit of a sum equals sum of limits, even with the multiplication by a constant. And you can clearly see that when c equals 0, there's actually really nothing to prove because you only have one term. Now assume that c not equal to 0. So we have this assumption, c not equal to 0. And let the limit of the function fx equal L and the limit of the function gx equal m. Then by the limit definition, we know that there are two for a given epsilon. So you pick epsilon, positive epsilon, and then you can see that there are two deltas, delta 1 and delta 2. Delta 1 for the function fx. So what we do instead of epsilon, you will see that we get the epsilon half. So the idea is later, because it's a sum, you can add them together and create epsilon. So that's the idea. So what we do, we split it into two parts. So we get epsilon half for the first one and the other half for the second one. But we still need to make some adjustments. Let's see what we're going to do. And for the function g, there's a delta 2 such that the difference of gx and m less than, it's not just epsilon over 2, you also need to multiply by the denominator multiplied by absolute value of c. The reason is, you can see in the theorem there's a c term, so just to cancel that out we multiply the denominator by c so that it cancel out, and you will see the algebra in a minute. And then what we do now, we want to make sure that, so this is an interesting logic here, we have used this earlier also, we want to make sure that this both of them get satisfied. So because of that, we're going to pick the minimum of the two as the new delta, minimum of the two. Because why minimum? Then we know that if the the difference between z and c naught is less than the minimum, is automatically less than the other two, because minimum makes a smaller radius than the delta 1 delta 2, or equal or less, because the minimum. So now we pick the delta minimum of delta 1 delta 2, and then you can see that the 0 less than z minus c naught less than delta. Now that's a puncture disk around c naught. So puncture disk around c naught, the c naught. So that's a puncture disk. So you can see that if something is inside this disk, is automatically inside the delta 1 disk and the delta 2 disk, because delta 1 or delta 2, we don't know which one, can be bigger than this one, because we pick the minimum one. So the larger one is, so it's like, that means if you pick the smaller one, it's automatically inside the larger one. that means those two conditions are satisfied automatically. So now if you pick a neighborhood like that, this implies that what we do, we write the condition that we need. This is the function sum. This is the limit sum. So we take that and take the difference. Now what we do from the triangle inequality, we can split them. So what we do, we're going to collect F and L, and we collect G and M. That's how we do separately. So then we get, this is for the F, this is for the G, and you can see that this still we have the C outside. And then now what will happen? Let's see the argument now. We know the first one is, because we picked the smaller delta, so the first one is less than epsilon over delta. The second one is less than, you can see, there's absolutely C here, but you can see that the condition that we pick is epsilon divided by 2 times absolute value C. You will see why we need that. Now you can see clearly those C get cancelled out. So that's the reason why we introduced that here, so that it can cancel out. Now we can see simplifies to epsilon. So we get epsilon. So that's the idea. So you really don't need epsilon over 2. You can have one like epsilon over 3. Other one is 2/3 of epsilon. So I mean you have more options for that. But epsilon over 2 makes much more sense. Okay, now, and clearly you can see that we have used a triangle inequality here, which is proposition 113 that we learned earlier. So this proves the result. So because of that, so by the epsilon delta definition, now we see that the limit of the sum equal L plus C M as decided. Okay, so that's how we prove it. So now as an exercise, try to prove the rest, and especially the product rule and the quotient rule can be a little challenging. So you can even discuss that in the discussion board. So now let's try to look at a few examples. Okay, so let's look at this problem. So example 211, limit laws. So find the limits as c goes to 2i of the functions. The first one is z3 plus 4z plus 5. B is the quotient 2 plus 2i divided by z, and hz is another quotient. We have z squared plus 4 divided by z times 2 minus 2i, z minus 2i. So let's go one by one. So the first one, here what we try to do, we try to use the limit laws. What are the limit laws? We just learned the limit of a sum is sum of limits, limit of a product is product of limits, and limit of a quotient is limit of quotients, quotient of limits actually, yeah, when the denominator is not equal to 0. So let's look at the first one, and you can see we first assume that the limit z goes to 2i, z equal to I. This is very easy to prove using the limit definition. And then now we use part A, part B, and part D. You can see we are using everything. So first is a sum. So we break them into 3 parts using part A. That's why we use a part A. So it's a good idea to think about which one we use every time. And in the second one, you can see we use part B now here. That's part B. So we, when we have a product, you can break it into 2. And also we assume that extra condition here, limit of a constant is the constant itself. So it's an extra assumption that we made. And the same thing goes here. Limit of a constant is the constant itself. So see how you can prove that using the limit definition. That's the kind of interesting examples to try. Okay, now so that we use part B, so A and B, and then we use part C here. So you can see you can pull the power out because of parts, actually part D. So that's part D. So that's how you should try to understand this, and where we use this. This is what we call limit laws. And then you can see we get 2i to the cube 4 times 2i plus 5, and then you can see simplify this, simplify really well. So what happened, 2i cube become negative 8i, see whether that's the case, and then you can see sum cancel out and you get 5. So it's become real. Even though we try to find a complex limit, your final answer is a real limit. Okay, so let's go to the next one. For the next one, we see that we use the same one, and we notice that the limit is not equal to 0. So that means we can use part A and part C now. So first we use part C to write the quotient as quotient limits, and then we use so here we use part C, and then we use part A to break the sum, and then we can see that you can find the limit of each one separately. This simplifies to 2. And part D can be complicated because you can see there are issues here because there is a 2I, but that makes the denominator 0. It's just like a complicated situation. So you can see that we cannot use part C for this one directly. You cannot use that because the denominator is 0. That means we need to make some different arguments. So, and then we also know that when C goes to 2I, what we do in this case, we're going to go back to the definition, limit definition. So let's see how we can use the idea. And we also know that when finding limits, we look at the neighborhood of C. We look at the neighborhood Z of 2I, not really the value value equal to I. So we assume that the Z not equal to 2I. That's the assumption we make when we find limit. We see what the behavior near the neighborhood. So because of that argument, and you can see, we can factor HC and simplify like this. So we can so we had C. What we do using the difference squares formula, we can factor this into these two factors, and bottom we only have this, and then you can see interesting thing happen. You can see this factor get cancelled out. So that is the observation here, that factor, the special factor get cancelled out. Why we can do that? We can do that because C not equal to 2I. Since Z not equal to Y, we can do that. Okay, that's like extra condition we need. And then you can see what we get is Z plus 2Y over Z. Now what we can do, you can see that you get the answer. So this simplifies to that, and you get the answer. So Z equals to I, and then you get 2. Actually, this is part B that we did earlier. So it's 2. So as further study, try to identify all the assumptions that we made here. And also in this solution, we use limit laws just to get the solution, just the limit laws. But another approach would be to use the continuity, because if you use the continuity, you can use what we call the substitution method to get the answer. That's the quicker ways to get the answer. But we didn't use that yet because we don't know anything about the continuity yet. So here we just use the limit laws. So try to compare the difference between the two approaches and try to like understand this argument clearly. Now for further practice, let's do a few extra problems. So you can try these as exercise and also have them in the discussion board. So we have a sum problem, a product problem, and a quotient problem. I got two quotient problems. Why there are two quotient problems, and you can learn few tricks here. For example, as hint for part C, you have to use what we call the difference of squares and the difference of cubes formulas. So that's the difference of squares, this is the difference of cubes formula. See whether you can use them and get the answer for part C. And for part D, we need extra result. We can see that you have C to the 5th power. So what we normally call we use the general version of the difference identities. For n integer, positive integer, we have this result. You can factor this into these two factors. We have one a minus b factor, and we have another factor with all plus signs. And there's another version for for a plus one, but in that case n has to be an odd integer. So this is how we so try to do these as practice problems, and you can also discuss these in the discussion board. Thank you.